I'll start. My name is Ellen Tone. I'm a board member for Mass Energize and a resident of Wayland, chair of our Energy and Climate Committee, and very active in our community-based group, Energize Wayland. This webinar is being done as part of Plugin, which is a multi-town initiative to help engage residents to take climate actions. And that includes Acton, I'll see if I get this right, Acton, Ashland, Natick, Framingham, Wayland, Sudbury. And tonight we are promoting clean energy actions you can take. We have webinars on heat pumps, solar, EVs, and tonight's webinar is a little different. And I want to thank Karen Root-Bockins from Acton for suggesting this webinar. We are going to hear from Carrie Katan from the Green Energy Consumers Alliance. I listened to Carrie's talk that she gave in Acton that really impressed Karen. And it's really about helping us understand. I think people are frustrated that their energy bills are high. Carrie's going to help us understand what goes into that energy bill. What are the pieces of it that make it so high? And where do you have any leverage to make some of those numbers go down at an individual level? And she'll point out other opportunities that are not at the individual level, which really are state policy. And that is, we're not going to talk about state policy on this call, but you'll at least understand the ingredients that went into baking the cake that you are eating, called your electric bill or your gas bill. Karen's going to talk for about 15 minutes. A couple of us going to offer a little testimonial because we've done some of these actions. That will be me and my colleague Tom Siaka from Wayland. And then, as we always do, we'll open it up and we'll have way more than half an hour for question and answers. And we will end promptly no later than 8 p.m. So with that said, that sound good to everybody? All right. I'm handing it over to Carrie, who will share their slides, and ready to learn, Carrie.
Okay, thank you so much for that great introduction, Ellen. My name's Carrie Katan. I'm with Green Energy Consumers Alliance. I am our Massachusetts policy advocate. So let's get into it. The question which I think we have all been asking while staring at either our electric or gas bill or both recently, why is this so utterly expensive? Just a little bit of background, Green Energy Consumers Alliance is a nonprofit. We do a lot of both consumer-facing work and public advocacy work to empower consumers and communities to speed a just transition to a zero carbon world. We do things ranging from putting out blogs on different energy policy to advocating in the State House to having an EV finder to help people find EVs and doing webinars to kind of similar to some of the stuff you guys seem to do about how to get a heat pump. So that's kind of where I'm coming from. Okay, so getting into the meat and potatoes of this. We're going to get into how gas and electric rates are set, why are prices so high, and then what can individuals do. So one important thing to lay out is, unlike most businesses, electric and gas distribution are natural monopolies. This basically means that competition isn't possible in many cases. You cannot have two companies each competing to lay wire to your house. And you cannot have two companies each competing to be the one that provides you gas, because building out more than one distribution system would be ruinously expensive. That actually did exist for a very short period in American history when the electric grids were brand new, and it was so chaotic it very quickly ended. Now that we have kind of two models to deal with this monopoly fact. One is you just make it government owned. That's what you get when you have municipal light plants. Or you can, like we do in most of the state, give a company a legal monopoly on supplying electricity or gas within their jurisdictions, but constrain what they can charge to just and reasonable rates. So that way you don't have them abuse their monopoly power to overcharge residential customers. Okay, so this may be leading you to wonder, what is a just and reasonable rate, and how does that translate into my absurdly high electric bill? The just and reasonable rate is determined by the commissioners of the Department of Public Utilities through a process of what is called a docket. In these dockets, the utilities argue that they've spent X money to deliver power or gas, and because of that, they need Y compensation. And because of that, they want to charge residential customers this, commercial customers that, and industrial customers another thing. The reason that different customer classes pay different amounts of money for power is because they tend to use the electric grid differently. And that means that the costs that they impose into the system can be a little bit different. Throughout this entire process, the Attorney General's office basically acts as the defender of the ratepayer. The utilities in a, not a shocking development for a for-profit company. They would love more money. They would love your electric rates to be higher. They would love their shareholders to be getting more money. In a perfect world, they would just be doing that as much as possible. The Attorney General's office is their counterweight. They're constantly saying, did the utilities need to actually spend money on this? Do they need to really make that much of a rate of return on the money that they've invested into the electrical grid? Do these plans that they're proposing really necessary, or can we cut back on that? And the utilities and attorney general's offices will go at very long debates in DPU dockets to try to determine what folks' rates should be. As they go back and forth, they question each other's assumptions, and they each try to push things in their direction. So that's kind of how things work on the distribution side. Things are a bit different on the supply side, and you can think about distribution as the roads that you travel down, and then supply is the cars that go on those roads. There is a natural monopoly for building the pipe that gets gas to your house, but that doesn't really exist on the supply side, actually putting gas into that pipe because you could have an independent company on one side of the system put in gas and you're taking it out on the other. You could do exactly the same thing with electricity. So in the 1990s, Massachusetts, along with a lot of the neighboring states, reformed our electric and gas systems so that now you could buy electricity or gas from someone who was not your utility. At the same time, Eversource and National Grid were forced to give up their power plants. So they no longer own significant amounts of generation. Instead, they have to go out and buy it in order to supply it to their customers. This process was called restructuring. It was supposed to save folks a lot of money. It's hasn't totally failed, but the question is, did it really work as intended is honestly still up for debate. An important thing that is needs to be said at this point is that the the separation between distribution and supply is why, and the fact that utilities make more money for the more they invest into their gas and electric systems means that they don't actually make money by selling you gas or electricity. They make money building the infrastructure to get gas or electricity to your house. And the electricity and gas itself is actually the thing that they just have to send through the system to justify all of the infrastructure they get to build. And the more infrastructure they get to build, the more they can make. So they have kind of different incentives than I think a lot of folks think when they wonder, what these companies want. So, because there are different ways to buy power, there are substantially now three different ways you can do so. So, the first one is basic service. This is when utilities buy electricity on behalf of their customers. By Massachusetts state law, they have to go out once every 6 months. This is why you'll often see news articles being like Eversource rates are going up, 15% in July. Most of the time, those news articles are reporting their basic service rate changes. Um, and because the utilities need to go out at predetermined times to buy electricity, this will mean that sometimes they're buying it when electricity is really cheap. Sometimes they were buying it at a very bad point, and electric rates have to jump up all of a sudden. We saw this in the winter of 2022 to 2023 because of high gas and electric use. Overall, basic service is not the cheapest way to buy electricity, but it's also does not tend, on average, to be the most expensive either. So let's get into the most expensive way you can buy electricity, and honestly, possibly the closest thing to just villains in this story, and that is third-party electric suppliers. These are independent companies, some of the biggest being Clean Choice, Inspire, Clean Sky, that will directly sell electricity to customers. The idea was that these largely unregulated companies would compete with each other and that this competition would drive down electric rates as everyone switched away from the utilities to one of these suppliers and benefited from cheaper electricity. That's was the theory. That's not how it happened. Most people chose to stay with utility basic service or go to municipal aggregation, and many people who did switch to third party suppliers ended up getting scammed and paying more than they had to for electricity. These companies have a history of lying to customers, greenwashing their products, making them seem much more environmentally friendly than they actually are, and violating consumer protection laws through things like pretending to be from their town's municipal aggregation program or pretending to be from National Grid or Eversource. We strongly advise you to never sign a contract with any of these companies, even if it looks like they're offering you a good deal that is cheaper than what, National Grid or your town's municipal aggregation program is offering you. A lot of those times, those contracts in the fine print have automatic renewal provisions, which means they're going to take the low teaser rate they sign you up for, and then they're going to just keep increasing your rate every couple of months and just hope that you don't notice. And I have seen folks who have complained to the Department of Public Utilities who are paying 50 cents a kilowatt hour when the normal market rate at that time is closer to 15. So that gets us to the third way you can buy electricity, and the one that overall we strongly recommend. Municipal aggregation is when your town goes out and buys electricity on behalf of its residents. A massive benefit of municipal aggregation is that they can go out and sign long-term contracts. So unlike utility basic service, which jumps around every 6 months, um, towns can try to time the market. They can decide like, hey, long-term electricity contracts are kind of cheap right now. Let's sign an agreement for 3 years. So that way, if 2 years from now electric rates suddenly jump, we get to save our folks a bunch of money. So it tends to lead to slightly lower and substantially more stable prices. It's also worth noting here, as we're talking about affordability, that many, but not all municipal aggregation programs will have their default program contain a little bit more green electricity than is required by state law. This also means that if you are cash strapped and you need to do the most affordable thing, many times there are optional cheaper prices still offered from your municipal aggregator that you could switch to without leaving the municipal aggregator. That's not an option in all towns, but it is available in some and worth checking out if you need to do so. Gas overall is just different. There are no municipal aggregation programs for gas, and the regulations for a third-party supplier selling gas are less friendly than they are when it comes to electricity. Um, eh, so there's less companies selling gas. It's very infrequent. I think about maybe 1 in 100 residential customers buy gas from a third-party supplier in Massachusetts, if that. Um, Much like with third-party electric suppliers, buying gas from a third-party gas supplier is not a particularly good idea because the prices they set are unregulated, so they could, you know, hope you're not paying attention on your gas bill and then just keep increasing your rates. So, why do we have such high prices? I guess one thing to point out is we do have slightly higher electric rates just because we allow third-party suppliers to operate in the state of Massachusetts. In most of the country, they either are not allowed to operate at all, or they are much more tightly regulated than they are here. And this increases our collective electricity bills by about um, 80 to $90 million a year. But that's not really one of the bigger reasons. We also have the fact that utilities get to charge customers based off how much they spend, not on how much gas or electricity they sell. And in recent years, we've seen electricity demand in Massachusetts be fairly flat, in part because of the Mass Save program, the energy efficiency program. And the same thing is true with gas demand. Gas demand has actually been falling a bit in recent years. The problem that we start to run into with this is if the utilities are spending ever more on infrastructure, and they're doing so for both reasons because they have a strong financial incentive to spend more, and because we do have a lot of old pieces of infrastructure that need to be upgraded, and we do have places where electricity or gas demand is increasing, and there needs to be more infrastructure to meet that. We've seen that utilities are spending substantially more at a time where they're not selling more units of gas or electricity. So each unit of gas or electricity needs to pay for more infrastructure spending, which leads to higher bills. We've also seen more recently the cost of natural gas rise nationally due to increased gas exports. It used to be that the United States, due to fracking, would produce a lot of cheap gas, and then that couldn't leave the country because we didn't have a way to get it out. Now we have more LNG terminals, which can put it onto ships, and that's pushing the domestic cost of gas closer to the international cost of gas. One big takeaway from all of these is that the people who are running around saying, if we just built more gas pipelines into New England, we wouldn't have such high energy costs, are not entirely accurate. It would not help us to build a gas pipeline if gas is also becoming more expensive in Pennsylvania, and building more gas pipelines would not cut the distribution costs for um, that are through the local electric and gas utilities. And a lot of those costs are the things substantially pushing up people's bills, especially on the gas side. So more pipelines, while in theory it could help sometimes, it wouldn't really fundamentally get at the heart of what's making Massachusetts electricity so much more expensive than much of the rest of the country. So, what can you do? There's obviously many systemic problems that have led to us having such high gas and electric rates, but there's a lot that folks can do. One is to know who your electric supplier is. I would strongly encourage each and every one of you, when click out of this webinar tonight, to go and check your electric bill so that you are sure that you know who your supplier is. Sometimes people will sign up with a third-party supplier and they will have forgotten. Sometimes they never signed up at all, but they are still signed up with one of these companies. It is not unheard of that one of these companies will do something illegal, like steal someone's information and then sign them up. Um, a lot of these companies will do profoundly unethical things, and it is always worth checking to make sure that you're not paying more to them than you have to. Um, Additionally, that you can make sure you're part of your town's municipal aggregation program. Information can be found online. And as I mentioned before, many towns provide different options, so you can pick the one that is best for you. And again, it's always worth reiterating, don't trust anyone going door to door selling electricity or gas, even if they say that they are from your utility or aggregation program. The odds are that they're lying about that. Um, if you're a gas or electric customer of the major utilities, National Grid, Eversource, or Unitel, you or your landlord could contact Mass Save. They will do everything, they will do everything from the work with you on the big projects of like, switching to an electric heat pump to the much smaller things like we have some Mass Save stuff to put plastic wrapping over a window because they provide that. So you have a lot of options, and they're always worth looking to as a way to bring down the amount of gas and electricity you have to pay for. If you have an electric heat pump, the major utilities also have heat pump rates, which can save their users hundreds of dollars per winter. Um, if you have a heat pump installed recently through Mass Save, you would have automatically been signed up for this heat pump rate, which lowers your distribution costs. So even if you have a supplier from your town through a municipal aggregation program, this heat pump rate would still lower your overall bill. Uh, if you have an older heat pump or you didn't go through Mass Save, you do need to reach out to the companies and provide proof. Mostly, from what I've seen of at least National Grid's forms, it seems to be just pictures to show that, hey, I do have a heat pump. I do qualify. Please put me on this rate. And then finally, Massachusetts does have low income discount rates for gas and electricity. The eligibility requirements overlap with other means tested programs. So if you're on SNAP or Mass Save, you likely qualify. Finally, if your home is a good fit for solar, you can consider that. Solar can substantially reduce folks' bills. Of course, there are bad solar companies you should be aware of. I personally, from what I've seen, would not get within 20 feet of Sunrun. We recommend using the website Energy Sage to look at various options. And that's it. Thank you so much for letting me monologue about this.
All right. Thank you, Carrie. We're going to do a couple of quick testimonials, then we'll open to questions. So when we get to questions, you can raise your hand. You can also put them in the chat. So let me just say three things. One is, if you haven't really looked at your bill in a while, there is this charge for distribution and the charge for supply. The distribution costs are volumetric, like they change depending on how much you're using. So it's not a fixed number, which is why the heat pump rate applies on the distribution side. So it's a lower rate on the distribution side in the winter for how much electricity you're using. So it's kind of important to understand that because it's still a good incentive to use less energy, right? And to make sure you're on the lowest possible rate on the distribution side, which really mostly is this heat pump rate. So two things for me. I'm in Wayland. We have an aggregation program. I think every town in the 6 communities does. I saw someone from Concord. You have a light plant, so you have a different situation. And if you are living in one of these towns and you've not signed up for your aggregation program, you should. Everyone was moved automatically um, to uh, to the standard product in the aggregation programs, and then people could opt up to 100% green or opt down to the minimum renewable energy required by the state. And that, for some people who are pinching their pennies, is a good call. So. We chose to opt out on 100% green. The rates just changed recently, and the 100% green rate in Wayland is still less right now in the winter than the Eversource basic service rate. That may change when the rates change in the spring. It is, if you're on an aggregation program and you're feeling stressed about your bills, you can go to that aggregation program site and decide to opt down if you want to the basic economy. So these are terrific programs. They're really well thought through. We go through RFPs, we vet the suppliers, we lock in a rate for 2 years. And on net, it's can't guarantee that it's always a savings, but on net, these programs have done very well when compared to Eversource Basic Service because they can go out for 2 years, not every 6 months, and end up in these unfortunate cycles, as Carrie said, to go out to bid when an unfortunate time. The other thing, I'm a proud signer-upper for the heat pump rate. We did our heat pump. Everyone who did it in the last few years, one with mass save rebate, was automatically enrolled. We're an early adopter. We did get a mass save rate, but wasn't part of the data dump. So I had to go to the website for Eversource. And as Carrie said, it was so easy. I just took a picture with my camera on the plate on the outside of the heat pump and the compressor in the back of my house. I uploaded it. I sent it to Eversource. 24 hours later, I got an email saying, "Thank you very much. We got your thing. We're putting you on the heat pump rate." And my next billing cycle on my bill, I could see it's when it showed my rate, it said HP1. And it should save us about 24% on our overall bill and about over 40, 60% on the distribution side. So it's a real savings for those of you guys have heat pumps. So, um, Tom, I know you just switched from a third party to aggregation, and you also had this. Let me say, utilities generally are difficult to deal with. This signing up for the heat pump rate was spectacularly easy. Like the best experience I've ever had with a utility. So if you should check your bill if you have a heat pump, and that rate also applies to charging more electric cars, all our other use of electricity, and you qualify whether you have one mini split or a whole house system. So Tom, just you changed from third party to aggregation, and I think you also had a pretty good experience signing up for the heat pump rate.
Yeah, so let me say that I disagree with Carrie a little bit. I've been using third-party suppliers for many years, made out very well with them, but I watch them like a hawk. I'm an energy nerd. I never, ever, ever have let them just renew. Every time the contract is over, I look for another one with a wonderful introductory rate and keep that as long as that one lasts. So if you're willing to do, do that, you could make out reasonably well for a long time, but not this last time. My last contract was up in December, and so I went researching what was available. I was paying 11 and a half cents supply rate for a year and a half. But as of December, the very lowest available was 14 and a half, and that was not a green rate. The one I was on was. So it turns out that the best deal available right now is my town's aggregation rate by quite a bit. It's a hell of a bargain. So I mean, each town is different, but everyone ought to check that out. And in fact, it was such a bargain. And given the current political situation, I thought it was more than worth it to opt for the 100% green rate from the town. Um, and I'm very happy with that. On the heat pump rate, 3 years ago, I installed a small mini split, um, which it turns out actually handles 85% of my total heating needs, and that the pre-existing and still existing system in the house is a gas furnace. The heat pump let me heat the house for about a third less uh, in dollars than I was spending with only the gas furnace. And as of end of October, when the EverSource heat pump rate became available, went online, filled out the application, which basically consists of name and address and account number, and a picture of the nameplate on the compressor outside your house. Upload that. Um, that was, I believe, on October 30th. I submitted that. Within about an hour, I had an email confirming my submittal. 3 days later, I got a hard copy in the mail confirming it. By the end of November, I had a bill with the heat pump rate on it for about $70 less than the identical amount of usage last spring. In other words, I saved $70 immediately. I've had another one in December, obviously with a higher amount of usage with the colder weather. Savings was about $85. I project I will have about a $500 annual savings, which is what the official average projections are. And so overall, I will be spending about half to heat my house as I would if I had just stuck with my gas furnace.
Okay, so we're opening it up to questions. I see a question from Michael in Acton, Carrie. Biggest question in Acton's aggregation program is higher than basic Eversource-based service, but I don't want to abandon ship. Is there a downside to leaving the aggregation program?
I would say it could be worth checking to make sure there's not like a lower tier in the aggregation program. Though I don't know Acton's specific case. I would say probably not, but I do remember at certain aggregation programs, the last time electricity prices really spiked in 2022, 2023. I think some of them stopped taking on new members because there you couldn't buy more electricity. So if you were an aggregation program selling at a fixed price and more customers were trying to join the program, when you would have to go out and buy the electricity to supply them and at a much higher price than the one that you had promised to supply to the town. Um, they just couldn't do it. So they decided like we'll take on more customers later. So I think that is an unlikely thing to happen. It could, in theory, happen if there was some disruption to our natural gas system.
I
But
mean, I think it's always worth calling the aggregation. I don't know if Mass Power Choices, Karen is running the Acton program, but there's always a number there and you can leave, but sometimes there can be a lag in whether you can get back on. They
yes,
have to submit these names to the utilities and it doesn't happen. Unlike Tom and my experience with the heat pump rate, it's not like it happens right away. They have a lag, so it's worth calling them to see and again compare your the lowest rate to Acton if you want to what basic services, unless somebody from Acton has another viewpoint on this.
I
Karen, are you
think
trying to tell?
Michael is right that at this point, the Eversource basic rate is lower than the Acton. Well, the Eversource standard rate is lower than the Acton basic rate by about a little under 2 cents per kilowatt hour. Um, and I mean, I think part of it is it's partly chance when the town negotiates a contract, what the energy market is like then. But I think one thing, and I know this doesn't really address the question of cost, Michael, but I think one thing to think about is that because town aggregation programs, and especially Acton's Power Choice program, is all class one RECs, which means that all of the all of the town support is going into renewable energy in New England itself. And so, even though as a homeowner, I'm paying more per kilowatt hour, I also know that I'm paying into a better, more renewable grid, which doesn't necessarily help in January and February.
no, that's sweet.
Good to
No,
think
it does. I mean, I want to support the community as much as I can. So
Yeah, I'm just looking at the basic rate, but the Acton basic rate is 14.411 cents. That is actually less than Eversource basic service right now. So
Really?
Michael, you could always, I'm on the Acton Power Choice. It looks like you could opt down to
ah,
that.
yep.
So go on the website or give them a call because that would be less. It wouldn't be as much green. It would be the minimum green, but you'd be paying less than Eversource because your standard rate, right, Karen, is 16.031, and the Eversource basic service right now is in the 15s. So that's a choice you have, Michael.
Thank you. Yep.
Yeah. Other questions or observations about how we set energy prices in this Commonwealth?
I mean, I have a very like Mike Craig here again. I have very different experience. We opted to switch over to full electricity heat pump last winter and saw a dramatic increase in the costs. Almost double what we had
Yeah.
been paying. And we live in an old house, so it's there's lots of other issues involved, and we were always upgrading our insulation and things like that. But it was pretty shocking. So we sort of have restarted the old gas boiler just to do some of the heavy lift, and then relying on the electric more for sort of.
Michael, are you guys on the heat pump rate? When you look at your bill, do you see under rate HP1?
Yeah, we are.
Okay, so you should be paying much less this winter than you were paying last winter per unit of use on the distribution side. You should see
And
it.
yeah, and we're using much less electricity as well. So, but yeah, I think we are definitely on the heat pump rate.
Yeah. Okay, good. I just want to make sure about that. Okay, Rob, and then Tom.
Yeah, I wanted to know, a while ago I had heard that if you have a electric water heater heat pump, that you also qualify for the heat pump rate. And originally when that came up, I applied, I sent in my information, but I did get a by a safe rebate anyhow on that thing. But I did send in the information, and 24 hours later, I got the information. Yeah, I was all set, thank you. But then months later, maybe like 3 months later, I got a request from a body who was looking into these rates, and they said they needed more information. And I said, why was that? So I sent them some more information, and I didn't hear from him again. I haven't checked my bill, so I don't know if I'm on the heat pump rate, but I was just curious. Am I entitled or am I not entitled to a heat pump rate?
I
Harry, do you know the answer to that?
I've never heard of water heaters being included under that. Um, I'll check, but I feel like the answer is
No. Okay.
no. And I feel
Yeah.
like maybe you could have gotten in just because it's a new enough program that they didn't realize the fluke.
Okay.
Yeah, I think you can go, Carrie, you could just Google the Eversource page on heat pump rates, and I can't pull up right now while I'm doing this, but it says what qualifies it. That's what Carrie said is, Rob, is my understanding too. I don't think a heat pump water heater would qualify you, but we can double check that.
Okay.
Um, and Abode is the implementer helping support the program, so they probably went back and like double checking stuff. So and they're great. Abode is great. So I think they're a pretty good organization. Tom?
Yeah, I wanted to comment on the disparity between my experience saving money with a heat pump and what I just heard someone having the opposite experience. Um, I'm I'm a heat pump coach and once had an HVAC company, so I know a little about the subject. It's not, I think, appreciated enough that there's a lot of difference in heat pumps. Most people just tend to lump them all as one category. But I was replacing essentially a furnace with a mini split. And that eliminates the duct losses of the furnace, which again is not appreciated enough as a very large inefficiency. What I just heard was someone using a heat pump in place of a hydronic system. A hydronic system has no duct losses. There's a reason why it was classically regarded as the premium New England heating system. So in that kind of a switch, I think with the heat pump rate, you would probably break even still. But without it, yeah, maybe it would cost a bit more. So in other words, it really, the details of what your heat pump is and what you had previously matter when you're making that comparison.
So Rob, I just looked it up while Tom was chatting, and it on the Eversource site it says it's a heat pump, but it says you have to take a picture of the outdoor compressor unit, and your hot water heater doesn't have such a piece of equipment. So my guess is you're out of luck, but it's time for you to think about putting in a mini split. All right, we'll go Karen and then Brewster.
Um, so Carrie, I have a question about Mass Save, because A lot of people last year blamed Mass Save for higher utility bills, and even tonight, they were talking about the governor's race, and one of the Republicans said that Mass Save and climate efforts have caused our utility rates to go up by two-thirds. Um, and I guess I'm wondering, do you have advice about how to counter that narrative? Um, I mean, what you said, I had never realized, but what you said about how, in a way, massive success might be a part of the factor in higher bills, where, if we're using, um, conserving more energy, using less energy, and yet each unit that we purchase has to cover the cost of the infrastructure. Is one of those catch 22s?
Yeah, so I'd say, I guess to answer your last question first, um, Mass Save is, I think, pretty clearly getting out of that catch-22 situation with electricity because electricity demand is rising overall.
Hmm.
And if it was like pushing down electricity usage, we would keep seeing bills increase because of it. But if it is instead taking electricity off the system that other people are then using other electricity, and we get to build less infrastructure to meet that new demand, then we're kind of out of it. So due to structural changes, electrification, people buying EVs, I think mass save for electricity is actually becoming kind of a better idea now than it even was when it was, getting up and running in like 2008. Um, on the gas side, I think things are a bit more interesting because the gas system is, there's kind of a backstop. There's always a limit to how little electricity folks can use, but gas is much more fundamentally replaceable. You can have a modern, comfortable home only using electricity without having a gas pipe going to it. You cannot have a modern, comfortable home only having, gas but no electricity going through it. So that is the development with falling gas use is really interesting. I would say as far as like the narrative of it's mass save is increasing folks' bills, there was a very specific moment where there was an increase in folks' electrical rates going into it was the winter of 2024 where the amount of money going into Mass Save because they were jumping to a new 3-year plan because Mass Save works in 3-year plans meant that that one-time cost increase was Mass Save. And I think folks have just pretended since then that all cost increases are Mass Save. And I think to be really blunt, what we have been telling folks and what is the honest truth about this is Mass Save is being made a punching bag by the utilities so that they can say, hey, look at this renewable energy, look at this Mass Save program, even though they also run Mass Save. But that's kind of beside the point. It's those things that are making your bill high. Don't look at the fact that on the electric side, for instance, Eversource has been caught using a wonky term for called an asset condition project for transmission lines. And these are basically really poorly regulated transmission projects that where they realized, hey, we can spend a lot of money on this. And because it exists in this weird halfway point between the federal government's regulations and the state government's regulations, no one's going to catch us if we spend too much money, which makes us more money. And like on the gas side, we're seeing them, uh, you know, through the gas system enhancement program, change out a lot of old gas lines, even though that means spending tens of billions of dollars on a gas system that less and less folks are using, which is financially entirely unsustainable because they're also doing this through finance debt. Um, so I think the thing to really push back on is that this is just a scapegoat by the utilities who don't want to take accountability for the fact that they own most of the problems that plague our electric system. I mean, there is a reason that municipal light plant rates have not increased substantially, even though some municipal light plants have taken a lot of great steps to reduce their emissions. Um, there is no strong correlation between renewable energy and higher electric rates. There are places like Texas where things are very free market, where there is very little state spending to support renewable energy. In fact, often the reverse. But because wind and solar is just out competing coal and oil and gas on price, we're seeing more and more wind and solar. So the idea, it's really just scapegoating by powerful interests. And I think that's the only way we can push back on this, and it is, to be blunt, the truth.
Thank you.
All right, Brewster.
Hi, yeah. Just kind of echoing some of the earlier stuff and adding maybe a couple of things. I had a heat pump that was put in about 2022, and they said I'd be automatically enrolled, and I was not. And it took quite a bit of effort. And I said, well,
Mm.
just wait, just wait. And I waited and didn't happen. And finally, I just had to upload the stuff like you had done. But I guess I would just say, don't assume that they did it. Make sure that you checked it and you get it. And I have to look to see whether or not they have back credited me because they said they would. But it's hard to tell with the way the bills come out. In terms of the heat pump hot water heaters, what I have in my house is a Sanco system, which I now think is called Eco 2, and it does have an external condenser, which is why I
Mm.
bought it. And so I don't know if that would get you around. I think that's probably still not the intent. The intent is, of course, for them just to be people that are heating their home. But just to let you know that there is an option for that out there, and it's instead of being 3 times as efficient, it's more like 5 times, 4 to 5 times. So
Oh,
it
cool.
might be worth looking into for certain people. I'd also echo the earlier comment from Tom there. Not all heat pumps are alike. I kind of wish that I had done more homework. I did not know about clean energy coaches in Acton when I did this. And I think sometimes either they're oversized or not appropriate, or they just aren't sufficient at a lower temperature. But with our solar system of 27 solar panels, we pay for half our electrical, and we're all electric. And I have a house that's about as big or bigger and more drafty than not drafty, but than Mike's than he was saying before. But we did a lot of insulating stuff like that.
Mister, tell them when your house was built.
It was 1793. Yeah.
Cool.
So
Okay,
so,
you win.
but I did have all
No, I
full
have to.
cell.
I have to jump in, Brewster. Ours
Yeah.
apparently was our first part of our house was built in 1783.
Oh, wow. A lot of
Yeah.
little holes, guys. A lot
Yeah,
of little holes
well,
in
we have
those
a lot of
houses.
interesting insulation in our house. So we have like walls that are horsehair
Yeah.
and solid plaster, all those kind of things. So
I've
And
done all I can do. You still have hope to try and lower your bill.
yeah.
yeah,
I mean, the only other thing I'll say is, I was just looking at a sample bill, and, Carrie, it is true that the mass save number is like a decent number on your bill. It's not like it's $2. You know, for most people, it's probably more than $10. So, and I think, well, I'll just speak for myself. We've had two mass save audits assessments. Generally, I find them very underwhelming, and one of them they paid for a crap load of insulation for us. Like we really got $9,000 worth of insulation. We like it was totally worth it. The other one, then they came back. I tried to push them to do something, and they just couldn't get it to screen through their measures. We're all paying for this. If you haven't had one in 3 years, I'm told now that the program has evolved a little bit more and is really working towards decarbonization. There still are pretty good incentives on insulation. So they can't claim lighting anymore. That's how they made, that's how they justified a lot of the measures because lighting had such good paybacks. But I'm told that the program is evolving and becoming a little more decarbonization focused. So I don't know, Leslie, you and Tom were gonna give it a whirl. You hadn't done one in a while. Did you sign up for one, Leslie?
I can answer that, I guess.
Oh,
Yeah,
Tom, yeah, thank you.
we did have it done, and the man was very helpful, but basically there was nothing more they could do except give us a new shower head kind of thing, or um,
All
because
right. So,
because we've already done about as much as you can with our kind of house.
okay. Okay.
Yeah,
So,
yeah.
I would just, just Carrie, just to say, it's not enough in charge. So you can understand when people look at their bill and they're going like, what? I'm paying $12 a month for that? Why am I paying for that? So,
I think no. I guess I probably should kind of clarify my opinion. Yes, there's definitely Mass Save is very expensive, both in terms of like how much goes into it and in terms of like what other programs do. And I think there's definitely areas where I wish it was run differently. I think the state looked into taking away Mass Save from the utilities, which in part would end or need to give them incentive programs to run Mass Save, which do add to the program's costs. Unfortunately, they decided not to do that. I think the one of the big issues though with scapegoating Mass Save is a lot, especially on the gas side, a lot of the things driving up costs are systematic decisions the utilities are making to continuously do things to push up folks' bills. And even if we were to utterly eviscerate Mass Save as a program and dramatically shrink that cost, we not only see a lot of folks use more gas, oil, propane because the incentives they relied on for efficiency are gone. I think we would continue to see, especially the distribution cost of gas, continue to rise. So I think it would be the idea of latching onto Mass Save as the enemy is both, I think, while it can deliver short-term benefits, I think one of the main issues I take with it is just it does distract us from the things that are not only have made considerably increased folks' bills, but are set to continue doing so, and the things that, to be blunt, we have a lot less control over once the decisions are made. Once you replace a gas pipeline, you're going to probably need to continue paying for that, bar something really dramatic happening. But at any point, the state could decide to pull down the amount that goes into Mass Save. But money invested into infrastructure by the utilities isn't the same. That's going to continue being a cost in folks' bills because it's all paid for by debt um, for a significant amount of time. So that long-term focus, I think, is what we've been talking to folks about and what we've especially been talking to the legislature about over the last couple of months.
Thank you. I'm going to go Brewster and then Tom, but first, before they speak, since they've already spoken, is there anybody else that wants to chime in here? Or was any of this surprising to people about how the bills are structured? Everybody, any other thoughts? Okay, I'll go Brewster and then Tom.
Carrie, I noticed on my bill that there's, there are all sorts of different lines on it there in terms of X percent or point something something percent cents for each, these line items, one of which is for the solar. It's called out as solar. And I assume that's to help underwrite, on payments that will go to help people put more solar in. I just thought it was a little bit weird that I have we have your regular meter, and because I have solar panels too, I have a net meter. But I seem to be getting charged for it on both, which there's a certain irony about that. That I'm getting, it seems to show up on the top part of the bill and the other one. It's like, any, does that sound true to you at all, or am I?
I would have to see I've never seen actually an electric bill from someone who has solar before, so I can't actually say. My understanding of the net metering charges is that's just showing the power that, yeah, I can't honestly, yeah, without seeing an
I
electric
seem
Sure,
to be
bill,
getting
I
I
couldn't
can
give you.
I can
dinged
check
twice.
mine too.
Yeah. Yeah. I seem to be dinged twice. It's being taken off on that one, it's being taken off on that one. And you think that to a certain extent, if you already have a solar thing in there, you've done your part, you shouldn't have to underwrite any more solar.
Well,
I
Carrie,
also have solar. I've done the on grid as well as a DIY version, which is about a third of the official one. But um, anything to do to cut these electric bills is
yeah,
definitely
yeah.
warranted. So
All right, we have 2 minutes. Tom, do you have a short final comment?
Yes, I want to I want to pass on a story about EverSource responsiveness. I have a case, a client who had a heat pump installed October the 30th. Their next electric bill a month later did not have the heat pump discount. They called Eversource. Eversource immediately reissued the bill for $100 less. So if you were supposed to be on it, and you weren't, and you didn't have the discount, call them. They might very well credit you in for the back charges or the back credit.
Yeah, I
All right.
really agree with that. Oh, there's, I guess, one other consumer protection thing I like saying. One common theme throughout, uh, seeing folks who are dealing with third-party electric suppliers or solar companies that are behaving badly, which unfortunately sometimes does happen. One of the best things you can always do, you can complain directly to the company. You can also, in many cases, complain to either, depending on the exact nature of the complaint, the Attorney General's office or the Department of Public Utilities. And I've seen, especially with third-party suppliers, uh, suppliers paying back consumers a substantial amount of money in order to make sure the consumer drops the complaint against them because they don't want the Department of Public Utilities to use those records of complaints to try to get the supplier kicked out of the state. So you can complain to the AGO, the Department of Public Utilities, your state rep, your state senator, complain loudly, complain often. It is very often very one of the good final tools you can use when normal channels have failed.
All right. On that final note, I'm going to wrap us up at 8 o'clock on the dot. I want to thank Carrie for teaching us something and the
Thank you.
complexities of the regulatory system. And thank you guys all for joining and chiming in, and have a good rest of your evening.